Hi everyone, this is Michelle Iantuono. I'm the writer and director of Detroit Evolution, and I also did all of the post-production from editing to sound mixing to visual effects as well. And of course, I was the one tasked and responsible with doing all of this work for Detroit Evolution Noir. So this is a deep dive into all the different changes I made for the Noir edition and how those came about. So the most obvious difference about DE Noir from Detroit Evolution is the black and white cinematography. Now, a lot of people might assume that I just put on a black and white filter or something to that degree on the entire movie, but that is actually not the case. Every single frame of the film, every shot is hand graded to achieve the perfect black and white noir hue. If I simply made the shot into black and white, this is what it would look like. It would just be a kind of flat image, a little dark on the side. But I ended up sculpting a different version of the black and white, starting with a black and white filter that had some changes in the highlights and the shadows, also had a little bit more sharpness added. And I didn't mess with the curves here, but I could have. I did that a few times in some of these shots. I played with the curves. I've also added a film grain, which adds a little bit more dimension to the image. This sometimes has a little bit of grain to it. I didn't really do much of the actual additional grain, but I still thought that this was too dark, and ultimately the way to solve that is to add a light. And there's a lighting feature here in Adobe Premiere where you can actually add spotlights and change the lighting on any shot. And so in this case, this is our spotlight here, and we can move this around the frame to wherever we want to highlight in the frame. You can also change the brightness and intensity of the light. So you got this full range of options here on the side to really tweak and fine-tune that to your heart's content. Also, one thing that I did with the lighting, and I did this through the film filters, or I did this through the Lumetri panel here, was I added vignetting, and I had to be really, gentle with this because it can look really gross if you do it too much. But if you've noticed these side shadows on the edges of the frame, they go away with this film filter, and that's because I have vignetting turned up here. If I really wanted to crank it, I could turn it all the way up here and make it look very, very, very vignetted, but I find that to be very distracting. I find it hard to watch movies that are heavily vignetted, so I just went very gentle with it and just put a little bit at the bottom here, just so that it would have a little bit of dynamic lighting and the edges to make it look like an old-timey movie. Also, I've done it over here in the Lumetri panel too, so I've got a little bit of that vignetting added to here. You got to be really gentle with this in Lumetri because it was very, very easy to overdo it. And again, if I had just added a black and white filter and not done anything that I just did, it would have just kind of been flat and dark, and then the highlights are a little ugly here after not being adjusted. His skin tone is too gray, and that's such a contrast from what we actually did in the film, which is this. So don't let anybody tell you it was just a black and white filter, because there was a lot of stuff that went into it beyond just making the colors black and white. A lot of lighting effects, a lot of film grain, a lot of vignetting, and other impact. We did a full jazz soundtrack for Detroit Evolution Noir from scratch. That was Austin's doing, so I didn't have much say over that. But the other part of the audio was actually the dialogue track. And as you can see, I changed up the dialogue track here and made it a little bit more muffled.
Oh, shit.
BPD, what are you up to tonight, kid?
Now, how did I get that effect? So it was actually something that I couldn't do in Adobe Premiere. I had to bring this over to Adobe Audition, where there is a specific filter that I can use to give that compressive effect. This is a filter that is called the Fft Filter. And I don't think there's an equivalent in Adobe Premiere. I had to use Audition for this. With the Fft filter, I made a template, and when applied, this is what things sound like, and you can toggle it off.
Illegal, right?
Okay, man, I know how bad this looks, but...
And it really makes a difference, and there's a lot of different changes you can make. You can play with it along the way.
You know the purpose of Android maximum registered dealers is illegal, right?
Okay, man, I know how bad this looks, but... truth is...
Now the difficult thing about this part was making sure that it maintained that crispy 1940s muffled kind of tone while still being decipherable and accessible. I was really worried that it was going to be overdone to the point where you couldn't understand what anybody was saying, that everybody sounded like they would be in a wind tunnel. I wanted to make the dialogue still very clear and decipherable, but just have that kind of old-timey radios feel. I think I misfired on a couple scenes. I think a couple scenes sound a little bit more like they're from the 70s. They sound like an old 70s TV show like Starsky and Hutch or something, but for the most part, at least it doesn't sound like the original audio, which is very clear. It kind of aged it a little bit no matter what scene it is in the film. Now the final thing I did was add new title sequences and credit sequences. This was a combination of effects. This is an old-timey look movie effect layered on top of some new noirish font effects on our existing credits with just a very simple background that I downloaded off Envato Elements. So this is pretty much structured from scratch in Adobe Premiere. But the opening titles came a little bit different. Those were from an After Effects template, and there's a lot of different layers to every bit of this. You can see that this is where you can actually edit the text. You can change the font to anything you want. I went with Fontaine. This was a noir font I downloaded from Envato, but Ironclad was also one that I used a lot. We have a few different layers here. This is the background. You might have noticed that the backgrounds I chose for the credits were all the original backgrounds from Detroit Evolution. So this is the background that shows on this credit on Detroit Evolution. It's just in black and white. We have this nice cinematic widescreen frame here, which can be toggled on and off. A lot of different effects just layered here because that's how After Effects works. And that's everything I have for the behind the scenes of Detroit Evolution Noir. I hope you like this deep dive look into how I made this edit of the film. I look forward to showing you all sorts of new stuff we're working on next year. On January 18th, just come to Octopunk Showcase, twitch.tv/Octopunk Media at 2 p.m. Eastern, and you'll get to see the full lineup of great stuff we've got coming to Octopunk in 2021.